Hello everyone, good evening. My name's Chris. I'm co-founder of the Future Laboratory, and we are a trend forecasting, strategic innovation and consumer insight business. And in this presentation, I'm going to start to explore how I think really what is quite a diverse and disruptive cohort that we call Generation Z or Z are starting to demonstrate some really interesting and innovative mindsets and behaviors, especially when it comes to brand engagement and loyalty. Now, if I was going to ask you to take away one key learning from our research, it would be that we're talking about a generation that is hyper-aware, hyper-connected, and hyper-individual. And as a result, they are challenging brands in search of a more equitable value exchange. They're even more brand promiscuous than the millennials and that my generation, Generation Xers are. And living at the height of cancel culture, this generation is, I think more than almost any other, is highly educated in the woke washing behaviors of businesses. And as a result, they're often, I think, quite brand disloyal. And as a result, and I think the way technology is changing, it's certainly becoming easier for young people to support or to disown a brand when they feel they no longer uphold the same values that they do. Now, according to some recent research from that we've seen from Ipsos, 40% of Generation Z would boycott a brand compared to just 16% of their older cohort, the millennials. And further research from Ipsos shows that 86% of UK Gen Z shoppers have already walked away from a brand because they have heard or experienced something they didn't like about it. And I think this sense of brand disengagement is, for many of us who have grown up with brands and maybe now work as part of a brand, and where brand loyalty is so endemic to our experience of our relationship with consumerism, this kind of ability that this generation have to just switch off and change loyalty is actually both alarming from a professional perspective, but also quite perplexing, I think, from an engagement perspective. What we're beginning to see, I think, with our media landscape beginning to shift towards what you could call authentic activism and this sense of a more sort of an engagement with issues like environmentalism and ecology that's about inspiring accessibility, that's about getting stuck in, getting engaged, being part of the solution. Gen Z are already demonstrating how brands can act as partners and help facilitate the change they seek. And just those simple words, I think, start to demonstrate a very different type of hierarchy that is beginning to emerge. And if I was going to give you one word which maybe you don't use as part of your normal language every day, but it's great to maybe slide into a pub conversation, is this notion that we're moving from very much brand and social hierarchical engagements to heterarchical ones that are actually more networked, more federated, and more democratic. Heterarchic. It's a great word to just drop into a conversation. It makes you sound super smart. But clearly, I think with Gen Z, we're beginning to understand that their attitude towards problem solving, towards partnering, and towards engagement is already well underway. Take a look at this.
Honestly, how are we going to fix the planet?
It's worked already. If they just wreck something is already wrecked. What other choice do we have? Die?
We need to be positive.
Okay, I'm positive we're gonna die.
Pretty soon, we won't even be able to grow food because of climate change.
It's crazy.
My dad says it's not the heat, it's the humidity.
And what does your dad know about humidity?
Everything.
The world has way too many problems.
Someone's got to do something.
What about aliens? They'll probably know what to do.
That's a stupid idea.
Okay, so the Made Good campaign there, looking at this idea of unwrecking the future, and even the language there, I think, really starts to show us about this shift towards a generation that are really, I think, trying to find their own sense of authenticity and realness, even if for us at times it feels cranky, it feels the reverse of authentic, and it just feels just something totally alien. But I think that's also a really exciting thing about this generation. I think we've been through a sort of 20 to 30 year period of brand cohesion and brand homogeneity. And now I think we're really beginning to see what, both with Generation Z and the generation coming behind them, Generation Alpha, this real sense of a different type of approach, a different tone of a voice, and a different opinion, which, you know, you either find scary or you find refreshing. And I personally find it super refreshing. We're beginning to see, hand in hand with this, of course, a new emerging class of community-run brands that really do understand this notion of partnering and engagement, that are turning customers and consumers into creators. And again, this collaborative approach towards brand is, again, part of the shift that we're beginning to see. We're beginning to see how brands are inviting their consumers to contribute to the aesthetic and the voice of their products. So we're seeing how, for example, the digital first fashion house Finesse is using data and AI, and most importantly, I think, community feedback to predict trends and also to produce virtually prototype designs that the users and their fans, their network, then vote on in order to work out what's going to be the next product category, or the next, hopefully the next leading product development for Finesse. And equally on screen, what you've got here is Save Me, which is a direct-to-consumer water brand, a DTC brand, that's allowing customers to shape both the messaging and the design aesthetic that's available online and in store. And through their online portal, consumers can create their own canvas and use bold and striking typographical features and to create their own message on the cans, which they can then buy for themselves or upload onto the store and share with their friends. And this notion of collaboration, I think, is really so critical. We're seeing so much of this, I think, in the F&B category, and how also these two categories are expanding beyond products, and they're starting to offer useful services, platforms, communities, engagement portals, in a way to, I think, become more and more enmeshed in the everyday lifestyle of their customer, and to better understand customer mindset and customer behavior. We're seeing this quite a lot in the non-alcohol beverage sector. So one of the examples that we've looked at recently is the alcohol-free beer brand Freestar. They recently launched a free WhatsApp hotline, which offers advice for unemployed Gen Zs, and they can book sessions with experts from businesses like Propercorn or Tesla in the UK and the BBC, in order to get some one-to-one guidance on how to prepare for an interview, how to write a good CV. They get follow-up calls from their mentor. And it's very much about this idea of starting to think about how you accompany the consumer on their journey, on their life journey, and start to become a partner with them in their life. And this sense, I think, of how brands foster more loyal consumer relationships through actually presenting a very human face and a very human way of thinking about engagement is one of the most critical things that's going on here. It's that it's no longer based on loyalty points. It's not about earning money, earning credits, and kind of often those very kind of push-pull engagement factors that we've seen by previous brands. It's far more based on the understanding of, well, how would I look after my friend? What would I expect from my friend? What does loyalty mean to me and my best mate? And I think this means that we start to see some really interesting opportunities for creating meaningful and purposeful connections through service offerings outside of just our normal product categories. On screen is the low alcohol brand Jerry's, and I think they're another really great example, building its brand on the concept of championing both physical and mental health. It obviously ties in quite neatly with their no and low alcohol stance. And so they have a social club which offers events, pop-ups, and a roster of social gatherings that are aimed at building physical and mental well-being through their customer community. And when we spoke to Paul Weiber, who's the founder and CEO of Jerry's, he said to us, we also want to bring people together as part of the Jerry's social club, hosting regular events, rewarding them for their loyalty, and to be known as more than just a drinks brand. And I think that goes right to the heart of the issue here, which is this way in which we start to think beyond our core product offer and think about the peripherals that surround our brand, but that increasingly are often more meaningful than the actual product itself, the solid thing that we're used to. increasingly relevant when, of course, you start to think about the metaverse and how more and more of us as consumers and customers are beginning to make that journey through from an understanding of a product as a solid thing and a product as something that might just sit within a digital environment, a digital universe, whatever that platform might be. Moving on, I think I mentioned DTCs earlier. The growth of the direct-to-fan relationship, of course, is increasingly important. And when we see platforms like OnlyFans and Patreon continue to grow at the time that more old-fashioned social platforms like Facebook, of course, are in decline, media brands are moving towards these more intimate fan engagement models because they can understand the traction and the engagement point. And this presents an opportunity, especially I think for food and drink brands, to take cues from creators in how they interact directly with fans and how they start to structure rewards into this personalized kind of offering environment. And I think really, as fandom and loyalty and also amplification start to all coalesce and come together, we start to see how things like the esports organization FaZe Clan has launched an incubator program that turns its fans into potential clan recruits, and how that really helps them to boost global conversations, content output, and also the promotion of its activities. So it's this far more integrated approach to thinking about above and below the line marketing, consumer engagement, product sales, and then, of course, loyalty programs. And really, how we can't just take one in isolation. We have to keep thinking about what happens when we put all of those together. And again, I think that's such an important part of what we're looking at here. Now, for us, one of the other really interesting growth areas is this notion of crypto clubs. Crypto, a key kind of part of the language moving forward here as we start to think about the growth of cryptocurrencies, and we start to think about the idea of often really quite diverse, quite particular, and quite low-key memberships, groups, opportunities, and platforms. And, we heard from Joel earlier, who talked about this point that, our job, I'm afraid, for those of us on this call and watching who are marketers and who are involved in the notion of brand engagement, our jobs aren't getting any easier, they're getting harder. The idea of the one-size-fits-all marketing message just really doesn't wash anymore. And our job is to be as bespoke, as individual, as diverse, and as different as our customers are. And we've got to work quite hard in order to do that, because we've got to be able to find the right tone of voice, the right moment to have these conversations, and find ways of taking them off the main platform and have them in an ever-increasing world of difference and diversity, hugely different. And this sense, I think, of how we begin to see emerging platforms, which of course is central to the metaverse conversation that most of us are beginning to dip our toes into, is this notion of how we foster a more democratic relationship with users, how we start to maybe offer payment or partial ownership in exchange for their data, their content, and their engagement. And this is where I think brands are actually have a real opportunity, because what we're beginning to see in the long term over the next 10 years, of course, is how all of those traditional structures that were about the early days of the internet before 3.0 really starts to kick in was about free, and it was about what we got in exchange for our data for free. And we often didn't really realize as customers quite what we were giving away. And of course, as we now look at the power of GAFA or the global hegemony that we see from our Googles and our Apples and our Facebooks and our Sina Weibos, and our Tencents, we start to rethink and recalibrate actually what we're prepared to pay for and what we're prepared to give away. And this ongoing conversation is really, I think, sits again at the heart of what makes Gen Z so interesting, which is that they are part of a broker generation. It's about buying and selling. It's about trading. It's about partnership. It's about exchange. It's no longer this top-down relationship where you're the seller and they're the buyer, and therefore you sit at the top, you push and pull, and you just expect them to consume your product. I mean, those kind of days are over. And we see how, kind of websites and platforms like Sheet, depending on how you want to pronounce it, start to create new cultural reputations through things like tokens that provide tangible exposure for crypto creators. that take us beyond likes and follows, that start to take us into these relationships and these engagements where users can reward tastemakers with heat to show recognition for work, personalities, or contributions to the community. And it's this sense of how we reward, how we recognize. Because again, recognition and reward sit at the heart of a successful loyalty relationship. And I would really urge you to start dropping the word program when you think about loyalty and start to use the word relationship, because that does start to change the way that we think about what it is that we're offering. When we start to look at new other networks like Friends with Benefits, and how we start to see cultural memberships that are powering communities of, say, web artists who all share the same kind of value system, I think we start to see the opportunities here. When that launched in March 2021, it had a waiting list of 3,000, and it now manages its popularity by gating the community with crypto tokens and also having a really strict vetting process. And, you know, while Friends with Benefits is built for the internet, its Discord channels cover a diverse range of interests. And the platform is also beginning now, I think, to expand its influence into the real world, with its members gaining access to real life meetings and after parties in the music world, co-creating city guides that they describe as being an experiment in decentralized curation. And so this way of kind of starting involvement that might seem to be intangible because it's just online, but how that starts to filter out into the Gen Z communities offline and their real world involvements, I think becomes really interesting. And I think we're going to hear more about that in a moment. But just to finish, I want to give you just another short video clip. This has come from Irregular Labs, which is a Gen Z specific research and innovation consultancy. And they've made a short film called Regenerative Futures, which I think really starts to highlight some of the issues that this generation are facing and dealing with.
First generation.
What I want for the future can boil down to just one word: accountability.
I feel to some be plant-based,
Have the same rights as everyone else.
Compassion.
To the form of art, culture, and politics.
There we go. So Generation Z, loyalty. Think heterarchical, think partnership, think relationship, and think regenerative. Thanks very much.